Hi, I'm Jeff. This is Tropical Plants at 53 degrees north, and while I am stood here being dazzled by the light from my grow lights, even though it's absolutely pouring outside, despite it being towards the middle of the day, it's extremely dull and dark and very, very miserable. However, I'm here in the greenhouse surrounded by fragrant and lovely blooms, and today I'm going to ask the question, is this the best winter flowering houseplant that you can get? So if you live in a temperate climate, you may find that you want yourself to be cheered up by some lovely blooms and perhaps even some fragrance as well. And I think Cyclamen Persicum may just be the plant that does the job properly. So let's find out all about the wonderful Cyclamen Persicum. Let's dive in. And we are in. Okay, so, I don't even know how many cyclamen I've got here. Many of them I bought them this year, some of them I've brought them through from last year, but I certainly intend on getting more as time goes on. So what I'm going to try and do here is show you why I think these make such a great plant for either I would call mine like an intermediate greenhouse. I do have a warm side, of course. This side that we're in at the moment is kept to 12 degrees Celsius, and these cyclamen are doing absolutely fine. Of course, there are orchids dotted through the cyclamen as well, but they're really great when the streptocarpus are over, and they're fabulous as a very bloom heavy plant, which will take me right the way through till March. So we're going to have a look at these and try and discuss why they make such fabulous plants, and maybe you could have a go at growing them too. Because between December and March there really does tend to be a gap. Even in the orchid world, you'll find that many orchid YouTubers are posting that they've not really a great deal going on at the moment. So what I'm going to do is go through several points and discuss why I think these are such fabulous plants. So we'll just settle on that one for a moment, and you've got the wonderful Oncidium sotoanum there as well, just adding weight to that bloom display there. So first of all, Cyclamen Persicum is one of a number of species that come from like the Middle East area. We're talking the Eastern Mediterranean, places like Greece and Cyprus, Turkey, those kind of places. They grow in rocky areas, areas with scrub, that kind of thing, maybe some of the forested areas as well. There are loads of species. However, the one that we are concerned with today, Cyclamen Persicum, is one that's been used in hybrids over the past 150 years. It's been very much hybridized. This is the tender variety. Now, of course, lots of people are into the more hardier varieties like the Cyclamen coum and the Cyclamen hederifolium, and there are others. Those are just the ones that seem to be more well known. I'm not concerned with the hardier varieties because this is a tropical greenhouse, of course, and I can grow the hardier ones outside, but at the moment we're just focusing on the Cyclamen Persicum. So it's also known occasionally as the houseplant cyclamen or even the florist cyclamen, because, as I say, over the last 150 years this has been the one that's been hybridized to produce many of these varieties that you can see at the moment on these benches. So the first thing that stands out for me, of course, is the large variety of colours and sizes and shapes. So they tend to come in like mini, midi, maxi. Those are the words that are used, and you will find that some of them are in tiny, tiny little pots. Some of them are much larger, and of course if you grow, and this is one of the major benefits of growing cyclamen, if you grow them yourself and manage to get them through dormancy, and don't let people tell you that that's a tricky thing to do, it really isn't that hard, then you'll find that your cyclamen will grow bigger and bigger as the years go by. You can buy these maxi varieties. Now this one over here, this white one, wasn't a maxi variety. I think this was like a midi one, but because I've kept it for a couple of years, I've managed to pot it up each year, and the tuber, it's not a corm, it's a tuber, like a potato, the tuber has gone bigger each year. I have kept them in the past for several years. I think I kept one for about 5 years at one point, and it did get rather large, but this is going back many years. I'm hoping to keep these for much longer. They can, believe it or not, be kept for roughly 100 years. If you can manage to keep it for so long, then you're doing better than me. Imagine how big the tuber would be if you managed to keep it 100 years, and how fantastic those blooms might be. So that's my first point. There's a large variety of sizes, different colours as well. So we're talking from the whites like we have over here in the middle of the screen there, through to pinks. I think the pinks and the whites tend to be the ones that you find in the wild. We have magentas, we have purples. I have actually seen a yellow one. I don't know how recent that hybrid is, and there certainly don't appear to be any yellow ones in the wild, but I did spot a yellow one on the internet for sale. I don't know if that would really fit in with my colour scheme here. One of the other benefits, of course, is that you get the shading. So if I can zoom into this one over here, you can see that we're not just talking about a pink one here, we're talking about one with like a two-tonal effect to it. And you can also get, and I haven't got any of these at the moment, you can also get like feathered ones. So you can get ones with different textures on the bloom petals. So not just these, I mean these are like, they're like a reflex bloom. So again, I'll try and focus in on it here so you can see. So the petals are swept backwards, and you tend to get towards the bottom like a darkening effect. Probably better to show it on this one here. So you can see how the petals are swept upwards, and then at the bottom we've got this like a darker tone of colour, and that is certainly in the wild Cyclamen Persicum. That is the effect that tends to carry through even to many of the hybrids and cultivars that you can see here. It definitely tends to be darker towards the bottom. I'll just move round here. You can see on this one over here, again it's darker towards the bottom, still swept back. But what I haven't got of these where you've got like feathered edges to the cyclamen. Obviously we're in the year of COVID, and I found certainly in my locality that the garden centres and nurseries just don't have the variety that they had even in 2018, which is such a shame, because I was looking to expand my collection, but even the ones online are not anywhere near as interesting as they were like in previous years. But I'm sure that'll change at some point in the future. So okay, you can get all these different coloured blooms, you can get different sizes, you can get the two-tone effect, and as I've mentioned, you can get the feathered effect. We can also get the different foliage. So if you look at this foliage here, they tend to have like a heart-shaped leaf, and then you've got all sorts of markings and tones on those leaves, which also, to me anyway, make them more interesting. They're not like, those two are quite similar there that you can see, but if we move over to this one is a completely different tone of green there, and we've even got like a darker heart shape in the centre, and then that lovely veining as well. Something that's very rarely mentioned with houseplants is not just will they bloom, but are they fragrant? Now, the wild variety of Cyclamen Persicum is very, very fragrant, especially when they grow in like carpets of plants. I understand that that's one of the things that people notice more than the actual blooms themselves. They know that those plants are coming up because they can smell them before they can see them. Well, out of my varieties, and I have to say this is such an unfortunate thing with hybridising, it's almost as if the scent is an afterthought. And because these are known as the florist cyclamen, I think they've probably been bred to produce different colours and more long-lasting blooms, and perhaps even something that will transport well. I don't think that is something that's forgotten about. But out of my varieties, I did used to have a variety a few years ago that was a really, really strong scent. This pink one here, this two-tone pink one, is a really nice scent. And I have another two-tone pink one over here, which is also a nice scent. Unless you put them together, it's difficult to see that these are actually quite different. So what I'll do, I shall pick that one up, and I will just move it over here so you can see. So they are different, but they both give me a nice scent. Not as strong as one of the varieties I had a few years ago, but still quite a nice scent. So how long do these blooms last? Well, as people have pointed out to me in various comments, and I knew this anyway, the length of time that a bloom lasts very much depends on your own environment and whether you get all the care needs correct. So for me, these blooms in here, which actually this is quite an ideal environment for them, it's about 12 degrees Celsius. It can go a little bit higher, not much, never goes any lower. In terms of temperatures, Cyclamen Persicum are okay between about 10 and 18 degrees Celsius, which is what makes them good for a cool room in a house. But we'll come to care needs in a moment. So length of blooms, I'd say somewhere around between December to March, for me anyway. If you buy them in the shops, then you'll find that they may be in bloom earlier than that. And if you grow one yourself, you might find that yours comes into bloom a little bit later. So for example, over here I've got one, there it is. Now that one is quite slow growing at the moment. It's a large one, but it's quite slow growing, and the reason for that is that it had a pest. But I'll talk about pests in a little while. But if you do grow them yourselves, and some of these I've grown myself, like for example this one here, it's a little bit slower coming into bloom than some of the others, but this one has got loads and loads of buds on it now, and that's really going for it now. But that will take me a little bit longer into the season, so I've got like successional blooming there. So obviously the ones that you buy in the shops very often are artificially brought into bloom early. Now that's fine if it's within certain parameters. So for example, if you find that it's coming into bloom just as autumn's coming on, that's fine, no problem. However, if you find that yours is in full bloom and we're talking midsummer or even earlier than midsummer, then you may have a little bit of an issue in that it will want to go into dormancy too early. And again, I mean, the purpose of this video isn't to talk about what you would do with a plant that's out of its season, so I won't go into too much details about that, but just suffice it to say that if you're going to buy them in the shops, if you buy them and they're in full bloom in the middle of summer, you may end up just throwing them away at the end of their blooming period. However, if you make sure that yours are only coming into bloom with the onset of autumn and winter, then you should be okay, and you should be able to re-bloom it. So we've said long-lasting blooms roughly between December and March, give or take a couple of months. If you get some of those care needs wrong, then it might be shorter than that, and of course it depends on where you are in the world as well. The more that you are in a tropical area, the less likely that yours will last quite as long. Okay, so another point is that they last for years. I've already mentioned that they can last for 100 years, some of these plants. I think they're easy to care for, so I think this is another benefit to them. I think providing you've got a cool room between about 10 and 18 degrees Celsius, and most people have a room like that somewhere in the house, then you should be able to look after them and bring them back into bloom year after year. It's the dormancy that people talk about as being the issue, so we'll come round to talking about dormancy in a little while. There are a few pests. Now, especially if you keep them in the house. Now, obviously, because I'm in a greenhouse, it comes around to summer and all the windows and the doors are open to get the ventilation going. And these are open to all sorts of pests. So, yes, they do have some pests, but I wouldn't say any more than any other plant. So, I mentioned a while ago about this plant over here, and this one had the Cyclamen mite, otherwise known as the tarsonomid mite. Now you can recognise that by puckering on the leaves, but a quick spray of a systemic insecticide, or maybe a non-systemic insecticide, or even a soap-based insecticide if you want to make your own, that should at least reduce numbers enough of the tarsonomid mite for your plant to come back. So I do expect this plant to bloom at some point, but it will be late in the season. So what I will do at some point is I will induce dormancy for that plant and try and save it for next year, and maybe give up on the blooming length for this year. You can get grey mould at the bottom of like at the base of the leaves and the blooms, so you've got to keep digging in when you're looking at your plants and watering them. Dig right down. You can see the leaves very often rot and become quite mouldy. That's going to be less of a problem inside a house. More of a problem inside here because the humidity is quite high. And finally, the other problem that you definitely won't get in a house is vine weevil. So you do tend to find that the vine weevil, the adult beetles, fly in here and they lay their eggs in cyclamen pots, as they do with Streptocarpus pots and lots of other pots. They just seem to be attracted to this kind of plant, and they lay their eggs and the little grub comes out and eats all the roots. Again, not a problem I've actually had with cyclamen as of yet. I've had it with Streptocarpus, but that's just something to be aware of. If you're in a house, then it's highly unlikely that you're going to have a problem with vine weevil getting in there. So they are pretty much all the issues that you get with cyclamen. I've not seen slugs eating them. I've not seen aphids on them. That doesn't mean that they won't and that you won't find them, but in the few years that I've been growing them, I've not had that issue. So again, that's another reason that I think they make good houseplants. Okay, so there are my main reasons. So let's talk a little bit about the Kernes, because by now you might be thinking, I want some of these in my life, in my house, and providing some blooms and some scent through these colder, murkier, more dismal months where there is a distinct lack of bloomage all around. So we've said temperatures already, 10 to 18 degrees Celsius. They will wilt pretty quickly if you get them above that. They will go down to a little bit lower than that, but I wouldn't certainly let them get frosted, because these ones are the tender varieties and they don't want to get frosted. As far as watering goes, you can top water them or bottom water them. Just be a little bit careful with the top watering, because as I say, they can be prone to moles around the crown, because this is a tuber and they don't really want the water to go on top of that tuber. You don't want to do anything to encourage that. I do top water them, but I water them in the area around the tuber. Another option is to water them from the bottom. So if you've got a tray, put some water in that tray, leave it for an hour or two, and then take it out and let it completely drain. You don't want them sitting in water. So of course what will happen with cyclamen is that they will wilt if they are too dry or if they are too wet. So you need to know which one is the issue. The time to water them is when they are dry along the top. You don't want to leave them for even a day dryness, because certainly if they've got all these blooms up, you'll find that the blooms start to go sideways and will, like this kind of thing, you'll find that rather than being straight upright, they will start to move over to the side. They do that naturally as the bloom ages, but you'll know it's the bloom aging that's causing it, because you'll see at the top there, you'll see just behind, in fact, there we go, you'll see that to begin to form into like a fruiting body, so like a little football. They do like a little bit of humidity, but like I say, I've grown them in the house where there is no humidity at all, and they've been absolutely fine. If you're worried about it, then either give them a spray or put them on a tray of stones, put some water in the tray and just lift them up, so make sure they're not actually touching the water. You can use any general houseplant fertilizer. Just try and make it quite weak. Just give it a little water every couple of weeks with a little bit of that, or you can put one of those fertilizer sticks in, or fertilizer pellets. They're not particularly fussy about the fertilizing, but that will help and keep the blooms lasting a little bit longer. Okay, so the bit that everybody worries about, the dormancy bit. So all you need to do when it comes round to summer, so don't forget, because these are like Mediterranean plants, they are used to really hot summers and quite cool winters. So what happens is they come into bloom during the cool time and they go dormant during the hot, dry drought of the summer months. So you need to replicate that. So simply, when it gets round to spring and summer and the temperatures start to go up, you'll see that your plant starts to lose all its blooms and the leaves will start to yellow. So at that point, wait for it to stop growing, or you can just force it into dormancy yourself. You can cut all those blooms and leaves off, which is what I tend to do, or you can just stop watering it. Don't give it any water over the summer, and then when it comes round to winter, then you can simply start to water it again, and it will start to come into growth. You may notice that it comes into growth even earlier than that, but I would hold on. Don't give it any water, or if you do, just a tiny little bit, until you want it to really start growing. And then when you want it to start growing, come the autumn, then you can start giving it more water. I simply stick mine under the benches down there so it's a little bit darker. Frankly, in the natural habitat they're not going to get anything cool, are they? They're going to get very hot weather, very dry weather. If in doubt, think of where they come from, think of what's going to go on in the natural habitat and try and replicate it. And that really is all there is to it. You can repot them if you want to. I would wait till they come into growth before you repot them, and I would just use like a general purpose compost, something like a John Innes number 2, something that you would pot any plant in, any pot plant in, and it will be absolutely fine with that. Something quite rich, maybe even add a little perlite to it. So it needs to be well drained, but it also needs to hold on to some moisture as well. And that is all there is to it. So why not give Cyclamen Persicum a go, and then you can bring some much needed bloom and colour and maybe even a little bit of fragrance to your house or to your greenhouse or your grow room during those winter months. So I'll leave you on a plethora of blooms here, set off nicely in the middle with an Oncidium sotoanum, and for now I'll see you on the next one. Bye.